This is the first morning in Udaipur, India, and it's the first time I have been beguiled, if you will, by the imagery that we've come to believe is true. And these lakes, somewhat diminished pollution, it appears, and yet you can see it lingering. 3 lakes, one big one up there somewhere, a smaller one that runs right up through here, and then ties into this huge one that you can see over here. I was thinking I was going to walk around it, then I realized, maybe not. And we're also going to go visit the castle, or the palace rather, and I think that must be it up there. First impression of this town from yesterday evening and driving in was that it's cleaner. It's taken better care of. Even the homes look like they're lived in better, with a greater appreciation for their surroundings. Comparison, Jodhpur in the main is a pit, and there's no other nice way to put it. There are some redeeming things that I saw, but it very much fits the description of my first email. The sights are exciting, but the overwhelming pollution, filthiness is redundant and unredeeming. Moustache Hostel opened up about 6 months ago. I arrived last night. We'll just do a walkabout this morning just for the fun of it. Go down to the lake and walk around. Kind of what I did yesterday, and then keep expanding outward. This looks like it ought to be a temple, but it just seems to be a place for shops. But somewhere around me is a Jagdish Temple. Of touring guys in the Royal Enfield's motorcycles. Things I'm going to look at this morning is some of the art that's on the outside of the houses. So it just seems to be a tradition, at least in this local little area. This is interesting because it's kind of reflective of some of the rock art in the southwestern part of the United States. Here, just to the right of where you go across that pedestrian bridge, appears to be another chunk of temple, or the same one, I don't know. This is a gate, really, that goes to that pedestrian walk, but it seems quite old. Raggedy little gatherings. Appears to be some kind of a temple, and you can see some kind of offering little bowls up there that perhaps they put something in. Oh, they burned something, like maybe a candle or something like that. Here's a nicely done house and graphics. 2 women on either side. This painting reflects a wedding procession. Now notice that the obligatory elephant is over on the far right hand side. Here's the bride being carried in a palanquin, and here of course is the bridegroom carrying, interestingly, a sword in one hand and a flower in another. I mean, these are probably the equivalent of shouters, people letting everybody know that a wedding ceremony is coming. Go a little bit deeper into this alley. Here, an interesting doorway, and we'll just kind of go through it. Elephant to the right, horse to the left, and this is the god of something. I can't remember what it is, but it's very, very important. Elephant god, for lack of a better term for us. Appears to be 2 men on either side, but then notice the horses. These might have also been devices, as you know, used for putting a drapery over the front to kind of keep flies down. And then in the niches are those little cups that we saw that they can put some kind of, probably an incense in there and burn it. Daughter brought the motorcycle down through the narrow alley, and then they switched places. The daughter got on the back, mom's driving now. These are older buildings, somewhat alluding in outside design to the Havalis we've seen, but a totally different style. Obviously closed up, not open, except for those little niches for looking out and the little doorways. But on the other hand, the building next door has a balcony that you can stand on. A little more simple graphic. That appears to be 2 women rather than men. What that indicates, I don't know. This is interesting. Here the horse is on the right, 2 women, and the elephant on the left. Wonder what that symbolizes. Kind of a blue street like Jodhpur trying to claim it had. Imagine the day when these were fresh buildings. Might not have been cement here, but it would have been neat and clean. Not so bad right now, comparatively speaking. And that little balcony up there was kind of a high point visually of this little alley. Notice how that quite modern building is stuck right in here. It's probably a complete redo and a build up on what was here before. An example of the pragmatic wiring used all over the world in third world countries, on the assumption that only a stupid person's going to reach up there and play with something that's electrical and it's high enough to be away from kids who should be trained, don't stick your finger in light sockets. Another doorway, quite elaborately decorated, but it's inherent. You'll see that those are raised, plaster carved, if you will, and then painted. So it's maybe somewhat of a reflection of what we would have seen when this building was brand new. And on the very modest of buildings will be some of these graphics, nicely done. Wells dominate. Now they're obviously modern, at least within the last 50 years, but you wonder if they reflect where original wells were and just tapped by a newer infrastructure. Here down a little side alley on a side alley, there's some very large graphics for this home. Again, we have to be careful about being judgmental when we walk down alley within alley, because we don't know what's inside. This could be a very luxurious home on the inside. That's how they preserved the look of the original doors. Here we can see how the cement has been carved, if you will, but not embellished. Nice treatment I haven't seen before. Reminds you of the top of fortresses. Interesting, this little alcove allowed women to look outside on either direction as well as forward on their street, see what was going on. Now the motifs don't really change, but you wonder who the artists might be. Are they specialists? Do they just go around doing this? Well, he has a great skill and admired by the people, so it's a very good niche profession, I would think. Perhaps it's even part of the broader profession of painting. Maybe he paints your house, paints your rooms, or does this graphic. And notice the mirrors in here. That's a little bit of an embellishment. Poking up these narrow little side dead ends, I'm sure, just so we can see. There's some. Here we have a relatively modern building, I'd say, very modern. And a little bit of novel detail. Notice the upstairs has the graphics also. Here they've taken advantage of some of the stucco carving, I'll start calling it. This little symbol that says, take your shoes off. I need to find something really neat like that if I can. I'll start looking for the novel. This may be the artist's phone number. This is a little bit different graphic with two men, obviously an important man on the elephant and then the elephant driver. A girl dressed as Santa Claus, but she didn't respond to Merry Christmas. And also her mom didn't want me to video her. Interesting, on this doorway is a very tiny bull, and over on this side another bull, it looks like. And they're just done with little stick-on devices. So it looks like a very pretty modern home. And notice it's dramatic, but similar graphics. And those graphics extend into the home, which is interesting. Mirrors adorn. Certainly the women indicate some kind of happiness involved.
Hello.
Hello. It's interesting. It looks like the woman is holding an incense burner. And these symbols, like all symbols, tell us something, if we only knew. Now, not to ridicule at all, First of all, it's kind of the Egyptian view. Everything shows the side view of the face, the profile. Notice how the fingers really couldn't balance or assist much in that form. They'd be a little more naturally sculpted to the bowl itself or to the vessel itself. On the other hand, the left hand holding the flower seems correct. Notice the feet, very Egyptian-like. Her body faces us in the main, slightly rotated to the right, but the feet and the face point straight ahead. This modern-looking building, modern in the sense that the lines of the walls are sharp. It's painted and maintained well, but they were blessed with these very pretty archway windows and put graphics to match. They're an older, maybe even a shop now. Its graphics pretty much weathered down, but we're approaching the wall system apparently that goes around this lake. So I'll go down here and catch that bridge that crosses it. Probably a toilet. I'm not going to find out. I'm going to go through this entryway, which is the second one I went through yesterday. We're reversing my route. This old door once probably was used, but not anymore. Notice the spikes here. Those are to deter elephants from crashing through. This is the longer, narrower lake. I'll pan about it. This is the narrower lake to the west, I believe, of my hostel, and close to it. Up north of that, beyond that hill, is another large lake, but not as large as Pichola Lake behind me. But you'll see how they made a great attempt to make this a very pretty, almost Venice-like atmosphere. Even more so as I pan around this way. And you see that pretty but new arched bridge. And the bridge I'm standing is even more so. On this side, which I didn't do yesterday. Unlike the other side, this side for some reason has had in the past beautiful artwork. Traditional. And one wonders if some of this work reflects events that occurred on these lakes. You might think so with this boat. Tiger hunting scene with the Raja and his elephant man holding back that tiger with spears, and this one, the Raj getting ready to kill this tiger whose elephant has stomped him apparently with a foot, which should do it on its own. What's obscured by time is another horseman apparently protecting the Raj and adding to the carnage. This was a time when perhaps there were many tigers. Too bad this is all weathered away. It's very pretty, but typical. We'll see if I can walk by him without disturbing. Being reflected great merriment, men and women. And the next panel is interesting because it's just a series of parrots on branches. How this was very beautifully done to provide a sitting place for people at the water. But as is most of Asia and other third world nations, they build and forget. There you can see that arched bridge, a little bit prettier than the other one. This has holes in it. Now whether that's to carry some kind of a canopy, I don't know. Or it could be as practical as holding fishing rods. This is interesting. It looks like men are playing musical instruments while they warm their hands over a wood fire. Wood fire for heat has been the norm for thousands of years. Unfortunately, with 1.2 billion people doing it, more or less, it's highly destructive. Scenes appear to portray lifestyle. And this is interesting. It seems to show, in today's world we would say it's some kind of a gondola. But that's strange. I don't think there is such a thing. Although there is a gondola type thing here nearby. Maybe this is just a old portrayal or an old style portrayal of a new infrastructure. Thing I did notice when we drove from Jodhpur to Udaipur was the shift from the flat brown desert to the hilly, more green, more, not lush I wouldn't call it, but just more green. That's what this is reflecting. And also there were more of those karst-like designs like this one. To the tiger. Woman with an instrument feeding some deer-like creatures. Doubt a local restaurateur. Actually a street food vendor. Another woman feeding and entertaining rabbits and monkeys. I think this may reflect the clock tower, but I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know. Or the lion than the tiger. Here at the end, actually a very pretty shrine down at water level. Locked. Well, not locked. Is it? Locked from the inside. Someone probably lives here too. Interesting version of something we use even in the stronghold to keep cattle from going through. Variation on the theme is the center part swings, so you can probably have a tighter arc than normal. My hostel is back about a block on the left. But I'll just pan so you can see this huge lake opening up. And you'll notice that used to be a palace there and it's now a hotel. You can observe it by boat only. To make out the carved detail above this arched portal, if you will, on the wall leading to this bridge, but there's a series of elephants across the top in the upper left hand, all the way across actually, going different directions. Can't tell what the second level is. I think those are just blank. Lakes are not as elaborate as the ones on the other door for some reason, but probably equally as effective. Small shrine buried amidst these old buildings, but maybe once upon a time it was an important little place, and maybe still is. It has a sliding gate that's been open, so maybe it's actually taken care of. Seems to be a temple hidden behind here, and there's supposed to be one that's quite important nearby, but I'm not exactly sure where. This is pretty because it's so much white marble, or at least the appearance of it, probably a lot of white paint. We can take videos from the outside, but not inside, of course. Can't be sure, but I'm guessing the part that's not painted just is not painted. The part that is white, probably painted. Now that might be marble, but a white marble surrounds it. But imagine when this was its own little area, probably had some space around it. Probably could be seen from a distance, enjoyed, appreciated from all sides. We've not looked closely at the temple, so let's look at this base. First row, a series of figures. Then it looks like horses all around that row. Then the next row is elephants with their handlers, or somebody at the corners. Maybe not their handlers. Oh, it just looks like graphics. Wrong, because as I walk around it looking for greater detail, I do see what looks like a face. How many temples in the world have I seen that have these corner faces like this, particularly in Myanmar? And they look like they're different faces, don't they? I'm trying to get a good view of the elephants and this character here to see what was going on with the elephant's trunks. And it looks like they meld into him. I was thinking they were coming out through here, and maybe they are. But on the other hand, I think that may just be his hand from this arm and his hand from this arm, but I can't tell. Give us a better sense of it. It looks like this may be the trunk, and here the arms are coming around and folding into the classic praying position. A little Scott humor. Here a woman is throwing a pie into a man's head. Comments are based on extensive research. You should know that. Tell whether these are warriors with shields. This one with a sword, perhaps. This one with a club. A man in close proximity to what looks like a lion or a tiger. So maybe it's indicating the calmness, the neutrality, the peacefulness, the safety of a guru. This looks like a guru doing a 1-foot stand, leaning against a wall. Either a man's holding onto a post in the ground or telling his wife he's got a club, so she better behave. Those were the days. It's like just a pretty scene of a woman with some plants. And here perhaps a musician, unless that's some kind of hand grenade in his left hand. Here another warrior. Get mixed messages, don't we? Appears to be a woman making dinner for her husband. A hookah pipe. Maybe some men wrestling. Maybe a pretty yellow flower growing out of the stone. Wait, it is a pretty flower growing out of the stone. This looks like a man or a woman reclining and their one leg hooked over the other. Nearby another gorpa, which suggests another temple, so we'll walk over there. Quite a large gorpa. Imagine if we could fly up there. Someday we might. And look at all the detail. Not as impressive up close, but detailed for sure. Is there any rhyme or reason to the designs, to the details? They appear to be simply architectural design elements, graphics, if you will, nothing terribly symbolic that I can detect. But then, how would I know? This device now encumbered with loudspeakers. Could this smaller one have been an earlier version? Much more symbology down here once we're inside. Notice how the upper part seems to be a slightly different color. Is it just weathering? Was there a different stone? Wanted to catch the profile of the building. Beg. This setting probably gets a great deal of reverence. I don't know exactly, I don't know at all, what these brass posts are. Beneath that layer there, that obvious barrier there, are the figure graphics. And then down here below them is this wider area, just a very simple but consistent triangular graphic, and then it's a lot of the small detail that we've seen before. Probably characters from the religion, horses, elephants, and monsters. That may be something that's a clue for us, stepping on stuff that's supposed to be offerings of merit to the gods here. Realize I'm walking the wrong way around this. You should always go clockwise. This is just condensation, or if this is a intentional water feature. Notice that this is more of a squarish structure over here. Again, with some almost the same kind of... We're in a group of temples and sub-temples, and I don't know if they're temples or shrines, but here people do a ritualistic loop and they pray to each one in some quick fashion. And sometimes the smells in these places of the incense is just fantastic. On the side of this small shrine or temple is almost the same motif design. The figures, the triangular motif, and then our 4 panels of people, horses, elephants, and monsters. Imagine the history of this building, obviously in its last state of collapse, although cleaned up a bit. Sure what's happening here. My guess is that a truck dumped off a pile of this cement, or they mixed one up, and now they're going to do something up on top of here, whatever that is. Namaste. And so these women will be the hod carriers. And my guess is it'll ultimately end up way up on top or up on that scaffolding, and they'll reproduce what might have been here before or create something new that's similar. This street seems heavily filled with tourist type stuff. So my guess is that the direction I'm walking, which is behind me, is where something big is. Life goes on. We're at the Gov't Museum. We might as well go in. This is good. It's only 5 times as expensive. Find out what that horrible noise was. There it is. The Indians are laughing, but it really doesn't look funny. So we are here now. We're going to be walking up into this area. Up there are tornas, 8 of them, 1628 and over the next several years. The significance is that it represents each of the 8 rulers who gave their weight in gold, silver, and other precious items yearly on their birthday to the local population. Here's the detail we'll look at. Now these are ornate. So that gives us an idea of what unornate might be. And this is the body pole, which literally means the main gate. In 1616. That represents that tower we saw earlier in one of the graphics, I think, alongside the lake. Only the roof, we need to look for a corbelled vault roof, like some of the Egyptian pyramid tombs, and the fort at Chittagong, which we may get to. So we can presume that this probably was a palace. There's an elephant. An impressive triple gate entry. Can you imagine the royalty up on top watching the arrival of important guest procession? Here are some more elaborate and larger elephant spikes, and these are much higher on the wall, suggesting they expected bigger elephants. This is big and certainly would have been impressive if for no other reason that the ruler lived here. It lacks the artistic grandeur of the fortress in Jodhpur. What this was for, maybe for holding elephant, large beams, no telling what those were for. Perhaps inside the building. You wonder if that bland, blank face once held graphics of some sort. The upstairs is kind of impressive, kind of alludes to Jodhpur, but doesn't rise. But it might have, had those been painted with dramatic scenes at one time. This was an elephant parking lot. Whether these holes were something for the elephants or a recent innovation, I don't know. Looking back at the entryway, pretty water-featured garden area in front of the I'll call it the Palace. Creates a very pretty look, doesn't it? Between the two, the first one being almost a perfect shell or hemisphere. From this center position, I'm just going to pan from right to left across the front. Notice those domes would have been painted nicely. When they try to keep a place for tourism in third world countries, they often just whitewash it so that it doesn't look as bad as those domes look, and then say to hell with it. As long as the tourists come, we're not doing anything else. And nothing more gets invested. By these little rings down here, that this used to have a carpet installed. Most appropriate. We're now entering into the museum. Interesting, particularly for historians, a genealogical tree of the rulers of Mewar. The kind of thing you'd find on any public building in the United States, usually representing the council members of the city or the county at the time. Probably will not see, and that's the names of immortal companions of the Maharanas who are remembered with respect. In other words, the people that made their reign work, and work hopefully very effectively, certainly for the Maharanas. Gewgaws of power. Same as we'd find if we emptied out your living room and your bedroom and put it into glass cases. From one of the Navy officers, high-ranking naval officers. It looks like it's either a magnifying device or a combination of a sextant in the same. Obligatory armament room to show how we killed our enemies. Keep being the same. Little clue of Indian history and the history of much of the world. I think one of the cleverest kinds of swords, and yet practical. But I don't know, you don't see that many. You would think it would dominate. And sword, pistol, and hatchet devices here, I think protected the elbows. At the top there are a couple of small little things that look like they hold pens. My guess is they held feathered plumes. It's interesting. It's a double-barreled pistol sword. One is like one of those devices you hold in your hand. We've seen it, but it also has two pistols built into it. A mace. Nasty version of these handheld devices. A split blade, triple split blade. This is the story of the the wet wife of a famous infant that was planned to be murdered, but she substituted her own son to protect the royalty. In pistols, particularly 8 and 17, interesting. The rest were fairly straightforward. Here the mother of the graphics. I suspect this is the innards of the palace. Interesting, what we're seeing is a lot of inlaid tile and stonework, particularly because it's jammed. But pretty tile work on these corners. Here I'll pan this very quickly because it's really quite bland compared to what we've seen as a courtyard yesterday or the day before at the Jodhpur fort. That's a little bit of the detail of this column. This is interesting. It's an elephant horse, I think. Unless that's just a really curious horse feeder. Paintings do. Here is an important ruler sitting on his couch with his hookah pipe, and guests arriving. The man in the back behind the Maharana, don't know whether he's got a flag or it's some device for keeping things cool. 1572 AD portrayal of the removal Prince Jagmal usurped from the throne. It would rightfully belong to somebody else. Things do not look like they're going to go well for him. Praise the capture of a woman in battle, apparently, who this man in all magnanimity asked to have her return to her camp without being armed. Kind of pretty detailed. Very, very damaged, I think. Literally the whitewash job. This building, which has had a little bit of treatment, but so little as to almost mock the effort. Symbols of carrying a pitcher as you're carrying water for a ritual at one of the temples. It has 16 pillars which divided into 9 equal sections. Going up to the second floor. So far, nothing at all impressive here. We would call the Maharana to lop some heads, I fear, to treat this place so poorly. This is a pretty room that looks out onto the rather blah courtyard. You can see some detail in these faux columns. This looks like a bathtub, and I'm assuming that's how it was used. The columns are pretty in here. Now a smaller room, be a balcony type area. Yes, it is. All appears to be in white marble. And this particularly novel, the use of glass to create some color. I wonder when and if the sun ever gets to this window, because it appears to be coming from the far right. Yes, there is smog here. Little opportunity here to video anything closely because there's so many people. 1.2 billion will do that too. There was probably some kind of a little swing mounted on that. The Maharajas crossing a river in the flood. But what's interesting is notice the lightning up on top. Some of the back corridors were getting somewhere. Whether they were secret or thought to be secret, I don't know, but I doubt it since they're so well finished. You don't see this much. I haven't seen it yet. Normally you just see big, wide walkways. The narrow ones are the most efficient. Now we're in a much prettier cloister area, I'll call it. And you can imagine this with profusions of flowers. Here, if the Maharana, this crowd would go swimming in here. Don't see steps. Ah, yes, those are steps right there leading down. Very up on top had to be embellished with something. Nobody could have that space up there without doing something with it. See, the steps lead down, and then you could sit. You wonder if the water was a little bit higher, like up to that first level of stone, so you could sit with your body mostly submerged. Of course, the voyeurs could stand up there in the balcony and watch. I suspect you had to be well connected to be such a voyeur. Shame to leave such a place in such a tawdry condition. But maybe that's the reality of the economy. I think it's the reality of the stealing. I'm looking up at the corner now because I want to look at these rings. My guess is that these rings, which I see above all the arches, allowed for either a drop cloth coming down there or something coming out to cover this inner area, which is otherwise uncovered. Another pretty room with its own water feature now, but could it have held a swimming pool type thing, or was it just this kind of a fountain for reflection, etc.? And here with bird cages hanging from those rings, one wonders. Pretty massive rings for a light bird cage. Here a lovely view out this window to what looks like some kind of complex across the lake. Let's go up and take a look at it. Me again that it can be left so tawdry when the poorest of the world live here and could gain an income by cleaning this meticulously. He portrays a wedding procession, but this building looks like the top's been removed by the artist so we can see the women's quarters. But what I think it's fun to look at the styling. Here's the procession moving along, but now as it goes uphill, they don't have a way artistically to show that shift. So it's just a 180-degree shift right at this point right here. And then it continues on. But what an incredible experience it might have been. Notice the firecrackers, incense carriers. There have been some of the villagers or the folks from the outlying villages that came. This is a portrayal of the marriage feast at the city palace that we're in 1730. Hard to see these pictures without the reflection of the glass. Just a little hint at how the Maharajas lived. Somebody holding their gowns, somebody fanning them. An elegant room, there's no name to suggest what there is. Impressive, isn't it? We can't get inside to look at it, so this is all that we can do. An impressive room, to say the least. And that room is called the Kanchiki room. Stylistically, look at the size of the Rahman and the other people. Apparently standing in a bastion built in 1620. A little time to appreciate any of this because the press of hordes. Although a guide would be useful if you wanted to know something, unfortunately they so dominate the experience that you don't get to reflect. I think modern day hunters with their modern day tools and techniques are disgraceful. I imagine he had beaters that brought that bear, which actually looks like a boar, to him. So he just had to shoot. Then if he missed, one of these other guys made sure he hit anyway. It was a boar, and now this one's a bear. So here he's up in a tree, or someone is, shooting the hell out of a bunch of bears. I do recognize that in this photo he's under siege. If he's sitting up in that thing, you better be darn sure that it's pushing the animal right towards you until you finally got a shot. And if you don't get him, these guys will. Looks like we come into a kind of a pretty room. The use of that glass seems so pedestrian, though. We have an unmolested view for a short moment of this room, so I'll try to capitalize on it. Not as grand as the other one, but at least pretty and restored. There's some interesting devices like whatever that is. Maybe it's just a fan. Keep the Maharan cool. View from this high terrace, and if you didn't think there was smog here, this will dispel your disillusion. So this suggests that at one time it was beautifully done in either paint and or ceramics. I think that's probably paint. I've only seen ceramic, I think, on the inside here, unlike Portugal. And you can see that there would look like there's some design in the cement work itself. Imagine if they spent some of the incredible amount of money they must make here on the building. Some tile, not terribly impressive. I think the blue of this room contrasts nicely with the blue of this woman's dress. Pretty little niche with some picto tile, I'll call it. Very much like you would see in Portugal. A pretty little blue alcove, all done in tile, it looks like. Pretty it might have been in the day. Imagine thoughts of the persons who sat here contemplating what they saw. The romance, the trauma, the deaths, the fears. That's what these places symbolize to me. Refuges for the mind. goes to get a brief respite from that which challenges it, good and bad. I wonder if these are Indian. They were brought from Portugal. I'd have to study this detail more, whether those boots are European or Asian. This is a tawdry reflection of what probably was here. Another view of that palace, which is now a hotel, which you can only look at from the boat or with telephoto lens. Not terribly impressive. Doesn't even look that old. This apparently is some of the wall work, painting work or inlay work that still remains. So it would have been quite pretty, particularly with a background that was of a consistent bright color. These are protected by glass, although not restored, which is fine. But even here you see that the graphics seem relatively simple, except for the clothing. The woman's dress, the man's outfit have far more detail. Here's some more pretty graphic. We'll get down a little closer and take a look at this in detail. Tiger shoot, but we can't get a look at it because of the terrible reflection. I wish there were a book that you could get. This is an old ivory door. Imagine the number of animals that paid a price for this puppy.
Look at that. Look at that. Swing and peacock in India.
I believe he's doing the best for his family and he's trying hard. But the young man is absolutely bored out of his tree. It's just like a lecture in school, only worse. And he breaks. If nothing else, here we have an example of how, another example of how these rings were used just to create a seat. And you could sit in any direction, of course. And like we use our homes, certainly the Ramana, wherever it is, and his family had their own special way they used each of these niches that was so familiar to them. And look at that, a game built into the floor. Interesting room with the remainder of old paintings, except for that wall which was so ingloriously whitewashed. It's another children's game. Notice the stones that are designed to hold the carpet in place. This would have been very pretty. The reality contrast in this temple. Beautiful detail here with glass. It looks like inlaid, I'm sure, maybe painted a bit. But that wall over there, which used to have a similar kind of grand treatment, dull, blank, dead. It's like a layer of glass that's been painted that's about an inch or so away from something reflective behind it. So that you get that interesting effect as we move past it. With some kind of an audience hall. There, an interesting rolling chair. The purpose of this room was anybody's guess. It's on the narrow walkway between floors.
She wouldn't be able to go through here at all.
No. I would have suggested to say.
Yeah.
She won't.
Very European looking, the coloring, the paint, rather than what you see in some of the other places. And it could well be, since this was, well, this was 1620 and 1628, so as an assembly room. So it's the first time I've seen this heavy use of paint for walls. See that. Some of the palaces have degraded and they've never bothered to put this color back in place. A panorama that would probably be quite interesting. I don't know how much you'll be able to see as I move along here. I'll try and make it visible, but you may not. scenes from the life of the village here, around the palace, I guess. It's hard to tell.
Even in India, you have to pay a price for it. There are places around the temple where you get a miniature for even 50 rupees, 100 rupees. I
This
believe
is interesting as a three-dimensional sculpture, but not all the way. I don't know what you call it when it's only half the body. But that's kind of novel. I haven't seen that yet. And yet it's a direct extension of wall carving and temple carving. We're down below what looked to be very pretty and was and is in this courtyard. So this somewhat redeems what we've not seen in this palace. All this covered in glass, which has been smart and intelligent. Notice the fine detail of it, inlaying those scales, and notice how the scales are cut to be the same. Convex on the left side, and then that, whatever you call it, pointy on the other side. The bigger version. Take a closer look at this detail. Dramatic room, and it must have been a room for meeting the Maharana.
the room where the king used to have his breakfast.
Oh, he would have his breakfast.
The room where the king used to have his breakfast, but only after offering prayers to the sun god on the other side. In
In addition to this narrow corridor system, one of the guides disclosed that in 2004 someone inadvertently broke something and discovered a hidden vault that allowed you to go some great distance in the palace on a secret passage in less than 10 minutes. So, like many castles, I suspect, there are hidden routes for many nefarious reasons. The only novel thing I haven't seen in here before is that device up on top, whatever that is, looks like a ring. And then this, which looks like a ladder, a clever kind of a ladder, but I doubt it is. It may have been some kind of a paddle for some of those tall vessels that we saw. This may depict a normal hearth, if you will. And there might have been several of these throughout the castle, I would think. Private apartments of the prime woman in the palace in 1928. Don't know. Now you see how these drapes sit like this over those rods, when in this instance they hang on far more elaborate devices than we see in most homes, but the function is the same. Provide privacy, keep the flies out, allow for air ventilation or not. This might have been very pretty when its colors were fresh and its carpet fresh. A swinging bed, but obviously for a very small infant. It says that this is a doorway that opens up into something, onto a balcony or whatever. Here's a small little courtyard outside the Queen's bedroom area. Man is mixing up what we saw, a big truckload dropped outside of this palace area a few minutes ago. And then it will be lifted up to this man here, and here he's doing what we would expect. He's giving the surface, new surface, what we would call stucco, but we do it in white, they do it in red. Perhaps the local soil, I don't know. Attempting to make finer detail repairs. I don't know if there's anybody capable of doing the fine carving that was originally possible. That this entire room will be refinished and look quite beautiful. I think is the second final coat of white. Decent height stairs. The government has to have a place to store its booty. And these are they. collection of safes. Corruption and power by the number and size of safes. Had a picture of Obama's safes before and after the election. I think we're back in either a giant courtyard or one that we were in early and just was overwhelmed and can't recognize it. But again, restored, brand new, this would have been quite dramatic. This is a beautiful building, isn't it? Well, it's kind of pretty. It's not really spectacular. The edifice on top is interesting. It's also white. I wonder if it would be so much more appropriate were it in brass or gold. I'm standing in, had 4 fountains. You can see the nipples sticking up there. It may have been a water feature or even a well in the deep past. And here it is surrounded by more water feature fountains. So don't really know. More restoration work. This area will be converted into all kinds of commerce type functions. Little bone tools. He dropped one. I picked it up. It's just a bone that's cut off at an angle, so it's quite sharp. These men are able to start to try to do that fine detail restoration. This man working with a knife doing exactly the same. So again, the quality of work, like most quality of work, is number 1, knowing what the standard of quality is, and number 2, having the skill to achieve it. It's quite possible that what we're looking at is exactly the way it was done several hundred years ago. Slowly, meticulously, by hand, in exactly the same manner. It would be better if you called me tonight when I'm relaxing after such a day. Otherwise, I might give short shrift to your thoughts, and I don't want to do that. You wonder exactly what these kind of large spaces were for. Were there so many lessers living here that it was entertaining for everybody to look at everybody else? Another section of the palace being restored, and it's mostly done. But again, it's done by hand. This man is a lonely vigil. You can imagine our sheetrockers that go through this place at speed of light. But these people have neither the tools nor the skills to do that. But they do it in the old-fashioned way, which they know and understand. Textile and ceramic area. Here, costumes of the most important men of their time. Chuckle if you like, but in standing in front of me, you wouldn't do it. Part of you might be several feet away from the other. I wonder if the young liked their clothes. Perhaps their checkers more so. Beautiful embroidery or whatever that's called. I'm gonna get a close-up of this without the glare of those goddamn lights. Relaxed looking outfit. Might actually be enjoyable to wear, frankly. Questions like this always beg the question. What were those little girls like? What did they become? How did their lives turn out? Here's a beard with edgy drama.
These costumes on the left-hand side for the children.
Alludes to Bonaparte. Beautiful yellow material. Imagine that the ladies of this household had as much of this as they wanted. It was enough. Doesn't quite rival the Catholic Church. Steamer trunk. Pelican. Imagine when you traveled like that. It allowed you to get through the dust, the riffraff. Will dramatize the arrogance, the insularity, the vastly superior power of those inside it. Kind of cute one-seaters. You hope that they were heavily weighted at the bottom because, gee, you have the sense that they were capable of tipping over. Boy, would that send you to the galleys quickly.
They just go to picture. This side.
When you came running through, just like you see in Game of Thrones or any other movie of the era, people get out of your way. Ornate handles. This one actually had its own separate chair. I wonder if it was tied down. How elegant is this? Beautiful, isn't it? God, if I was as wealthy as some of these guys like Gates, I'd have one of these for myself. Run around town in. Or I mean, have you run around town in. You can just hear one of the people sitting in there saying, "Get it on, Moof. I got things to do today. Quit goofing off." Little bar there that was designed to keep you from inadvertently having your feet fall out. Tiny little butts they had, didn't they? You'd have to have 2 of these together to hold most average American women. It's nice. It gave a little bit of privacy and protection from dust. But on the other hand, you could see out. This one was totally secretive and very pragmatic, as you can see. This looks more like a British railroad car, and perhaps that was its point. You ask yourself, putting aside all of your democratic ideals, wouldn't you really like to run around town in one of these for a while? Interesting. I can't figure out. I think that they were for the same purpose of transportation. That's what these lower rings are for. But like on this one, I can't figure out what those heavy chains are that are hanging down. And it doesn't seem to be that there's a door access up in there for getting through. So I don't know what those are for, unless somehow these could be suspended from those rings once transportation was achieved. So you could get in here. World War II British field gun. We are through. At least 2 exits from here. But as I get ready to leave, you can see how bland this whole place really looks. Nothing terribly impressive. Outside in that big courtyard we were in before we entered the palace proper is this bit of detail. What they apparently do is they cover over the infrastructure of electrical with the large flat stones, and then that sets up the basis for the actual grade, which is this stone. Are they going to cement these in place? Yeah, I think so. Yep. Your supervisor checks the height. There's this grade that we're walking on. When they need to plug appliances in, they just stick the wires in the socket. Now we've entered into what I think was the palace proper. So what we were in before, I don't know. Have to investigate that further. Even today, access there is restricted. This is the residence of the present Maharana, as is the case with many castles, etc. in Europe. They're too expensive for either the state or the family to continue to maintain, so they come up with some cooperative function where the owners live in part of it and rent the rest out to the state. Then it becomes a tourist attraction, such is the case here. For our benefit, I might add. Give us more of an idea, too, of how these people lived and how these grounds really were taken care of. Now over there is the second island, and I'd have to check my records, but that may be the one that you may not visit. I just don't know, but it looks far, far more interesting than the other one we've been looking at. It looks older, more Indian, more palace-like. Elephants to dot this entryway. Here's a beautiful little park area we'll explore. Become self-deluded, I need to remember that India is a chimera. What you think you see is only the surface. The Crystal Gallery, which is composed of a shipment of crystal furniture like we've seen in some of the palaces, that was ordered from Britain but then locked away and forgotten for 400 years. But they want $50, 50 rupees more for that than they do for the entire $250 for the entire palace complex, and the $250 they wanted for me to use my video. One man shop. Ah.
Really?
Oh, really?
I'm joking, my friend.
Oh, yeah?
Read here. This is all in the Hindi.
And the taxi cab tried to charge me $1 for photo, $10 for video, and I laughed at him. And I said to him, lucky for the money, not me. Not only was Ratatouille a good meal, but Ratatouille was a great movie. Here another access to the water. Who knows what its role was in the day. It's large, impressive. It'd almost be Venice if it were not. But it has that potential. Remove or embellish that crap over there. And that crap up there. All of Asia, it seems like the bottom economy is dominated by agriculture, of course. But in the cities, it's by the sale of little teeny pieces of something that the small people have made. Villagers, people who live on the bottom of this society other than the lowest caste. Hard for us to appreciate how little it takes to survive. Pretty much where we were this morning. Getting a late start. I thought I'd get the sun when it went down, but so much for that idea. But we'll walk around and see what the nightlife is like on the other side of the bridge. On this bridge, it's indicative of how much quieter it will be over here. As is the case with many structures and many cities, our palace is looking more impressive at night than it does in the daytime. Or at least equal, if not different. What I was looking at was over here. I'm actually glad I'm on that side, I think. It doesn't make a lot of difference. It just changes the experience slightly. It's like a very nice hostel. Very nice building. Impressive looking hotel for those who love to spend money. Building a hotel. This is actually a pretty nice area of town. Actually, when you travel, you end up normally taking what you get because you just don't know. And when you finally do know, it's not worth the effort of changing unless it's really horrific. The thing is, walking the streets for the first time at night, it'll be totally different if I come over here tomorrow during the day. I mean, my perception will be different. I'm really approaching a parking area, so I'll turn around for a dead-end parking spot, mainly for motorcycles. So the Europeans I saw were just coming to this Italian bar. Now this is Christmas Day and Christmas night, not Eve. And there may be celebrations and fireworks. This is very pretty. It has a restaurant and a bar, so I'm sure people tonight are looking for a place to celebrate. The family place. Very lovely. Europeans seem to be flocking here. There may be some Americans. I'm just presuming they're mostly European. It has a kind of a pretty lawn, which is novel. Flag of India, I assume. Here another view of the palace. So you can see how far we wandered down. There's the temple we visited this morning. That's probably the restaurant where the families are going to eat. So the view at night, that building looking even less interesting, but slightly interesting with the lights on it. America. The young man if there would be fireworks here tonight. He said he didn't think so. not tonight. So I'm guessing that this is just a place where people like to come, where it's quiet, away from the hubbub. And these older looking structures look a little more interesting, or at least different at night. You gotta love it. Still they keep jamming in, taking every opportunity to move forward, even though they jam it up tight, because nothing's moving, because they're clogging it all up. Decided to just leave us tucked up and see what's going on, do something novel. They're going to back out. Normally they just keep driving forward, blowing their horns, hoping that Einstein's wrong. Cars keep right on coming. They'll keep right on coming. They don't have, in some measure, a choice. And they'll be tied up for who knows how long. Indian society would rather tolerate these kind of jams than abdicate the right to keep going down any and every street there is. Now this guy will probably try to cut right into where I am. Nope, he's going to do something smart. Takes a clue from the fact that there are a bunch of vehicles coming the other way, because they're always coming the other way. Or that this guy, more importantly, is backing up. On this dark and dismal street, because I think that the road hooks, there's a road that crosses here somewhere, and I can go down across the other bridge I went over last night and this morning. Race down these streets at mind-boggling speed. No wonder no one gets hurt, and I haven't seen it happen yet. So I'm going to go down this place here in the hope that it goes where I'm trying to go. Same problem, but with a little bit more room. This guy get his motorcycle out of the way, that car could move. There we go. Now he can move forward a few feet. But like that's going to do him a lot of good. I can imagine the odds of my walking down here. I can do it. Just a question. I increase my own odds of getting hurt. I haven't seen it happen yet. I don't want to be the first. Guy be, as Dave would say, my rabbit. It's on a cell phone, if you can believe it. Where everybody's coming from, don't you? Here's the redeeming value of this payoff. Do is laugh at it and pray to God you never have to live if you don't want to go across, but it looks like it's all blocked up. We'll have to see. The one guy that doesn't concern himself with all this stuff. Miracle of miracles. Everything is broken loose and it's pretty clear. Sewage, because they've lit the bridge archways. What happens is when you get to Udaipur, you are so pleased to find something remotely better than what you've been experiencing that you actually think it's pretty darn good. Notice this drawing in the hostel is far rougher looking. It's a quick and dirty job, and if you look closely here at the details, notice the eyes. They're not as finely done as the work that we've been looking at. And it's this sign, which is interesting. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning, and this woman is already at work doing laundry the hard way. They probably have different techniques for applying the soap. Notice she lays out the clothing, rubs the soap in with a big bar. And then she will pound the hell out of it with that flat paddle. So it looks like her technique is to do several pieces of laundry like that. Putting soap on some and soap not on others. I'm sure there's a rationale for it. So. It looks like she scrubs it too. Yeah, she has a brush. But occasionally, perhaps if she sees more dirt than usual, she'll use the brush to excite the dirt out. There's a lady in the nearby house doing exactly the same thing. A little bit different technique, using a couple of buckets there. You can see one on the right is probably going to be her rinse bucket. Here a man doing, and above her, some exercise to start the day. Other going-ons in the hood. Laundry's already out, probably from yesterday to dry. Lady sweeping up her little patio in the back. The washing function's been done so far as soap is concerned, but I can't be sure though. There may be several processes going on here at one time. Rinsed out that big bowl. I can remember when I was a child, my mother and father bought their first washing machine. Up until then, they used 2 basins down in the basement to wash clothing. They had a wringer of some sort, probably one of those washboards, and then they hung everything up on clotheslines in the basement, where, of course, the big coal heater was for our home at the time. And apparently, down directly below me, the people have already done their work. Notice there's a couple of ovens and a bunch of those gourds, if you will, or jugs to hold stuff. It looks very traditional. Over to the other side now and see if anything's happening over there. Not sure today if I'll walk further down that way past the palace around the lake a bit, not around it, it's too big a lake, or whether I will go back up this way and go around the rest of that small lake we've been over and up to the next big lake, or a little bit of both. It all seems pretty quiet on the day after Christmas. It's interesting to see how some people have done a lovely job of, just a simple job of painting that upper deck, that mauve color, versus the other people who had no interest in such a thing and yet have lots of real estate. And notice how they've prepared themselves to build on in the future. This is a tradition throughout the world, sometimes tax-driven, if you can believe it, like in Argentina, in Peru. Well, the only people we can see doing anything is over there, so let's see what they're doing. I'd say like birds and deer all over the world, they're just trying to get warm. Small, literal roadside shrine. En route to that upper lake, I'll call it. This is an entrance that comes up on the lake. This map is a tad confusing. My guess is that I'm probably right where my my index finger is moving. And we're moving this way is where I want to go to. So if I pan about, you can see those little towers that we saw earlier on the narrow lake. This is the optimism that I almost always have, in spite of my apparent blatant cynicism, is that while this is a trashed out resource, it still remains a resource. It would not take all that much in the way of civic commitment to improve this area and make it really pretty. Maybe be able to see a bunch of fish swimming towards the surface, and some even deeper in this quote-unquote aquatic environment. Ladies bathing in this stuff. Dressing along this road, past this old, I'll call it a Haveli, I saw some more graphic, a little bit older, not by much. It appears to be a simplified version of the wedding procession we'd seen. What she has in her hand, but I'm sure it's significant. And he appears to have something, maybe bird shit, just the reins and a sword in his hand. The sword may well reflect his ability, or the presumed male ability, to protect the woman. Across the street, another depiction. Again, it may be another wedding procession.
Hello, photo.
How are you?
Hello, photo.
Hello. Like a step well, but rather than a step well, it's just a kind of a rough pit.
Hello, banana.
Building interesting just because it has some interesting modern elements to it, yet using an older motif. This is a nice home and another graphic of a wedding procession. This is the waterfront of the lake as I've encountered it. Again, as you might imagine, it's the wealthy that dominate the waterfront. I think I might walk around. I'm still debating that. You can see that the wealthy have their toys. The only concern about walking it is that it may all be closed off by private holdings. But you see a crowd of people walking there, so perhaps not. We'll probe down there. So that area, I was correct, it's not dominated by expensive homes, by expensive hotels. And then past that large hotel there, it's actually blocked off, so there is no road that goes around, at least in that area. Over there further, perhaps there is. Here, I'm not sure what this man's role is, but interesting enough, he has a PFD, the last thing I'd expect anybody to have over here. That mattress type thing looks suspiciously like where he might spend the evenings. All that's left to us riffraff is this dusty pipe, sewer, busy road. Funky old tree. Branching out over still another expensive hotel, I'm sure, that blocks the water from access by the ordinary people. It's interesting. It's a water channel, probably to control floodwaters. A double gated one. In this massive barrier lies what must be a beautiful, elegant hotel complex. We'll walk around here as far as we can to still see the water. Looks like that complex might have been a palace at one time, although I think it's Nehru Park now. Probably take a boat out there. That may be a pretty fountain, can't be sure. Riding a motorboat, go around the lake, or you can ride on a scooter down here you can rent, or one of the fast power boats you can rent, and they're all lined up for that. Remember, with 1.2 billion, it doesn't take much to create a crowd. And if you've never ridden a horse, there you are. Pretty little building painted. It looks like it's probably a water pump building. This is a lost caravan that's finally been discovered here. Another tourist attraction. So now, foreigner's ticket. And if there's room on the boat, we're over to Nehru Park over there. I picked up a light PDF and put it on. Everybody looked at me, and then everybody rushed for the PDFs and put them on. Little temple up on that hill as we leave the dock. I wonder if I can get to it later. So Here we are. There's the hotel I walked behind to discover that all along that side is big hotel. So we'll walk around and enjoy ourselves. This is truly a refuge from the cacophony of Udaipur, although it's not as cacophonous as Delhi or Jodhpur. But here you can almost make believe that there is no pollution. There's a lovely wind breeze blowing towards the island, towards me. And here is a pretty bird to welcome us. A lovely place for a family to bring its picnic lunch and spend the day. The irony is, as you look at a country like India from the inside, as any other country, you realize a couple of things. The people actually do aspire to something better than what they have. You can see it in the way that they wash their clothes. Sometimes they put some paint on an old house, other things, sweeping the outside of their house. And it may be an absolutely ramshackle house in a really nasty, gnarly area. And they're out there every morning with a little broom sweeping the dust off the stoop. It's not much, but it's all they can do. This is one of the lake boat cruises, I think. You find places like this where, for whatever the reason, the government's felt that it has to provide money to keep a nice refuge like this, just to keep the people from, in my opinion, revolting. Lovely building. Now, this is called Nehru Park. You can pretty well believe it was occupied by someone very well up, and maybe Nehru himself. But that, of course, illustrates the problem. Nehru would have lived like this, but not his people. That is the atrocity of power in all cultures and all times. These are pretty little cupola features. I don't know what you call them, but they're lovely for being in the shade, having a nice view. I don't know what that is over there on its own little island. This is the beautiful shaded side right now of the park. And it is a very pretty park, nicely maintained. Don't know who she represents. But notice that structure back on the hill. I wonder what that is. And then we'll pan up to the top of the mountain off to my left. Certainly looks like a fortress, doesn't it? Anyway, hold on to your chairs. We're on a carpet ride now. Here in what we'll presume was the day of Nehru, these were beautiful water features. Now, this one I think I saw a little while ago in operation, so hopefully while I'm here it will ignite. And so rarely seen flowers. Here, more flowers. I passed a family and we said hello, namaste, and we chuckled about something, and they immediately offered me some cookies. And here they are. They're very good. It has a little bit of I'm not sure, a hint of a bread cake type thing, but I'm not sure. It's very nice, and is typical of so much of the rest of the world besides America. It's not burdened by tremendous amounts of sugar. So here's a building that's closed. Could that have been the residence in the times that Nehru visited here? This an interesting tree. Mainly because the branches and so forth are kept so close to the trunk. I pan about, you can see palm trees and other kind of trees I can't identify. You can imagine such an installation being useful to a major political leader, kind of like Camp David is for the U.S. president, as a place to meet other important people to achieve hopefully important goals. Looks like they've got something in mind. My guess is that those are either flower bed borders or something akin to that. Someone probably lives out here on a full-time basis. These are a pretty flower. First time I've seen such a flower, I believe. The petals almost looking gossamer, but not. Another potentially interesting water feature being used for fun today. These are when you learn to have courage, when you learn about risk analysis, which of those three to choose. Nero's little house down there would have been two fairly large fountain complexes. Notice how similar this is to the tomb of the great one that we saw in Delhi, the way that was laid out. So I found a bench in the shade. I shall relax and read. This is my refuge also. Here we're in a kind of a pretty area. I think it's a little bit north of the Nehru Lake. I think I wrapped around that lake I was walking along and the area between it and the Nehru Lake. And I'm now working my way, I think, to the west. This man is busy picking up trash in this, what I think is a riverbed, but for what reason I don't know. It's more like a swill channel right now, but probably in the monsoon season it really cranks up. You can see that here they're building still a higher wall than this wall, and that may be responsive to the fact that there are greater and greater droughts and greater floods in the world. You can see that that's another wall system over there. Looking in the opposite direction, you can see that there's looks like a major bridge or road bridge. So presumably they're going to put a significant artery right through there somehow. The bridge we crossed over is probably what empties water into this Nehru Lake. I believe this is the Nehru Lake. I think that's where I've intercepted it. But we'll just have to walk down here and see. That may be one of our bridges. I can't tell from here. But this looks like it could be a pleasant walk for a while along the lake. There's some rather large homes here, or whatever they are. Here a pretty little building. Maybe once had some real use. So once again we're blocked by a large hotel. That's the norm. Here's an obviously older building that's been finished off beautifully on the front, including those tile pictures up in the second floor and also on the face of the third floor. Small herd of donkeys carrying nothing but rock rubble. Probably just cleaning out some area. Where she'll take it's a good question. Imagine what a pretty place this could be if the things they just had in place were neat and clean. It's a pretty view. End of a hard day of entertaining tourists.